G'day guys, Mad Matt here. So in this video I'm going to show you how I fit an airbag suspension kit to my F250. See, when I'm towing the caravan and load it up, I do find that the rear end doesn't ride that well, and it's basically the suspension system needs a little bit of assistance to help carry the load. So in this video I'm going to fit that air suspension system. Now this kit, in the interest of disclosure, I've done a barter system with a mate of mine, Steve, who owns a company here in Australia called AAA Suspension. It's basically airbag suspension systems. He does a whole range of vehicles and some really cool stuff, and it's all made here in Australia. Obviously some of his components are probably coming in from overseas, but to the best of his ability he's using local companies and to manufacture, to do the powder coating, to do the laser work, cutting work and folding and welding and all the stuff that goes into it. So I'm pretty keen to help him out, grow his business, because it's good old Aussie stuff. So I'm going to show you how I install it. We're going to go right through the whole process. It's going to be a fairly detailed video. It's fairly long as well, but I think you're going to get a lot of really good, helpful information out of it. So let's go and show you what's in the kit. So I'm working in a mate's workshop, so I set up the back of the F-truck as my workbench and laid all the parts out so we can go through the system so you understand all of the components. Now, first thing, and this is a bit of a joke, but it's dead serious, first thing is read all of your manuals and instructions that come with the kit. This kit is really quite simple to install if you've got basic mechanical abilities. You're not going to need any really special tools or anything. You may need to go and buy a couple of different, you know, like thread fitting lubricant or sealant and stuff like that, but it's all very straightforward, and with a little bit of basic electrical knowledge and following the instructions really closely, you're going to be able to install this kit into your vehicle. Now, I've got not only the airbag kit, which this could be the basic kit that you purchase, which has the mounts for my vehicle. Obviously your mounts may be different if you've got a different vehicle, but it's got the mounts, it's got the airbags and all the bolts and fittings that you need. And then you can just fit a Schrader valve, which is a tyre valve, to the rear of your vehicle, and you just pump the airbags up as you need to do it. And that system works fine if you're a little bit more budget conscious. Nothing wrong with using that kit. What I wanted was a more advanced kit, because I want to be able to control this on the road when I'm driving. When I've got that caravan on the back and it's misbehaving because the road type's changed. Let's say we're now on a bumpy dirt road and the caravan's moving around a bit more. I want to be able to change the pressure in the airbags on the fly. So I've got the in-cab kit. So it starts here, which is this. This is a gauge, obviously not turned on at the moment, and then up-down buttons for the airbag control there. Now those buttons are going to do a couple of things. They're going to activate these solenoids. This is a down solenoid, and aside from the core solenoid being exactly the same as each other, the difference is the air fittings. Sorry, this is a down solenoid because I've got one fitting in it. This is an up solenoid because it's got these two air fittings in it, here and here, so air can go in and out to the airbag. So that's what's going to be controlled from that gauge or from that switch panel there. Now these fittings here are pressure gauges that feed a signal back to the gauge, so I know what air pressure is in the left bag and the right bag. There's two of those, one here, one there. And very important note in the instructions, it tells you that these pressure fittings need to be mounted basically in an upright type of position above 10 degrees. And that's, I guess, so they don't get moisture accumulate in the pressure valve, you know, in the air system. So important that you read the instructions and understand that and build your system accordingly. The next thing that's coming in the kit is a bunch of airline. This is 6mm air hose. Really important that you use the provided airline cutter or hose cutter, because if you cut this hose, you know, and squash it, or you deform the end of the hose here in any way, this hose won't seal correctly in these fittings, and that will give you air leaks and problems down the track. The air compressor is their own air compressor that they get put together to their specifications. It's capable of up to 100%, 100 psi duty cycle. I should say that again, 100% duty cycle at 100 psi. So that's got some serious ability. Now, you're probably never going to be running 100 psi in these bags. I think you'd be doing yourself a damage. But the compressor can also run up to 200 psi at 50% duty cycle. So it's a pretty grunty piece of kit. It does draw some reasonable amps at 23 amps, so you do need to have a reasonable power supply, but that's to be expected. On the outlet of the air compressor, it comes with this decent braided hose. So as you know, when you compress air, the air gets hot. So you need that insulation area before you get to your fittings and so on, so that it can cool off a little bit. Okay, then we come into this manifold. This manifold has a pressure switch on it here so that the compressor turns on and off at the right time. These will be our lines going out to the out to the airbags and that system, and this is where I can plug into to fit my tyre inflation kit. So we've got this hose, a gauge, and we can connect up to the Schrader valve. So all of that's fairly straightforward. So that's the bulk of what's going to come in the kit. A fair bit of stuff, but as I say, it's all fairly simple. I can't imagine that many of you guys are going to have much trouble with this. And if you're the sort of person who goes, you know, I'm not going to install it, but I want to know what goes on, this video is going to really help you out. Okay, so now that we've gone through that, the next thing I'm going to do is work out where everything's going to mount in the vehicle and start planning the install. So where am I going to mount these solenoids? Where am I going to mount my compressor? Where's the switch panel going? Where am I getting my 12-volt feed for the switch panel from? Where's my compressor going to get its 12-volt feed from? All of that information is what I'm going to work through now. So I'll turn the camera off, I'll plan that out. When I've got that sorted out, I'll then come back to you and show you what we're going to do. So I've spent a few hours really sussing out how I'm going to run the electrics, where I'm going to mount all the components, mount the compressor and stuff. So I've mounted the compressor, I'll show you that in a second. This was the hardest bit, was working out where I was going to mount the controls and the gauge, the pressure gauge. So I'm mounting it on my center console. This is a custom-made console a mate of mine made up for me. It's not, I'd love it to go somewhere else, but I just can't find anywhere. So it is what it is. So this will bolt up, will screw down into that position there. So from the driver's position, it'll look somewhat like this. I'll show you a video in a second, a bit of cutaway on that. Okay, so I'll just show you the underside here. Now, you're going to follow the wiring diagram. You're not going to look at what I've done and say, oh, well, that's how Matt did it, so I'm going to do it the same. So, okay, so what have we got going on here? This is going to be the power supply for the gauge. So the other end of that plug is down here. We've got 3 wires. Red is positive. That'll go to an ignition source. So when the ignition's on, that will power up through this fuse. An earth, the little black wire there, and this is for your dash lights. So when you turn your headlights on, the gauge backlight comes on. That's the 3 wires there. The other wire that we'll pick up here is this this wire here, which is actually a positive. It will come to this red wire here and go through this fuse. I'm just putting a 10 amp fuse in here because all of this is just triggering switches and a relay. So it's all very low wattage stuff. So that's that side there. This here is the pressure gauge inputs for the left and right airbag. So that's telling the gauge basically what's going on in the airbag. So that's the 2 there. So up here on the switches, basically I've used some 5-core trailer wire, because that's sheathed and harnessed up real nice, to give me the feed. So each switch needs a positive power supply, which is coming from that ignition source into the switch. So that's what this red wire running around here is doing. It's supplying each switch with that 12-volt supply. Then each switch sends a signal when applied down that 5-core trailer wire. So this switch here is brown, this one's yellow, this one's green, over here will be white. Okay, and they will, when you push the switch, that wire will then trigger the appropriate air solenoid to give you the response that you want. So when you're sitting in the driver's position, the way this is going to work, if you want the right-hand airbag to go down, you will push this button. If you want the left-hand one, you will push this button. And up will be the top 2 buttons. So it's kind of intuitive the way I'm laying it out. So the only other wire in this setup to show you is this red wire. So it's 5-core trailer wire, so it's got 5 wires in it. I've used 4 for the switches. The red is running back down all the way to where my compressor is going to mount, and it's going to go to the pressure switch on the compressor, and that will mean that the compressor will cycle on and off as required. That pressure switch actually activates a relay. But anyway, all of that's in the wiring diagram, and that's what I'm referring you to. Okay, let's have a quick look at how I've done the compressor. So this box is mounted up under the tray. I've taken it out of the tray. This compressor, I've mounted it up to the top of the box. It's actually going to be upside down, so to speak, so hanging. But the reason I did that is it allows me to have complete access to the box inside here without losing all my space if I mounted the compressor on the bottom there. All right, I'm going to also have inside here all the controls for the up-down solenoids and stuff like that, but we'll get to that in a minute. So I mentioned in the introduction that the instructions give clear instructions. There's a few instructions for you. So the instruction is that you get a pipe sealant product like this. Okay, this is just one I've got. You know, don't know the brand or anything. And all of the fittings, like these little fittings here for the manifold, they even though they've got that sealant on them, put a little bit of pipe sealant on each of those fittings before you tighten them up. And the reason for that is you just don't want a small leak. If you park the truck up for a week, you don't want to be coming back and having to set your airbags in. Basically, it should be a properly sealed system. So now the other thing I'll just make note, in the kit that was supplied to me, there was a air fitting going into the manifold here where you'd pump your tyres up. I'm changing the design of that a little bit, and I'll show you at the end of the video how I've set it up, but basically I'm going to have air outlets on both sides of the vehicle because the vehicle's so big. It just saves running an airline right around the vehicle. So my manifold is going to have the pressure sensor at the top and 3 outlets down the bottom here, and then the inlet is at the end of the manifold. So you'll come across this little plate in the kit, this fella here. That's for mounting Schrader valves. Now, even though I've got the automatic system, I'm going to mount this up so that I can manually blow the airbags up and down should something happen to the compressor or the electronics or whatever. I've got a manual system. So they're in there, 6mm hose will go in the back, and you unscrew these and you can pump them up and down. Easy as that. Obviously, when you mount it so that, you know, left and right is correct orientation, otherwise you'll confuse yourself. But they'll always run the same pressure anyway. Righto, let's talk about the airbags themselves. So we're at the position where I'm going to start installing these in the vehicle. So first thing, this surface here is a sealing surface. That's what these ribs are going to do. These 3 ribs here are going to seal against the plate, that plate there. So that sits down like that. Then we're going to use these bolts here to bolt this down into place. Now for assembly, test fitting and all of that, just put 2 or 3 bolts into this and just nip it down loosely, okay, not too tight, so that you can just do your test fits and everything. But later on you are going to tighten these down properly. Now there's no specific torque, but you don't have to be heavy-handed. That's probably the key to it. So if you're using, this is an 11mm bolt head, so if you're using an 11mm, it's probably actually 7/16, but anyway, if you're using that spanner, just do it up with that. Don't get your rattle guns out and get carried away, all right? So that's the main thing. The other thing we mentioned, that this collar here, when you put that piece and that piece on, you can actually rotate these collars to align everything. I'll show you what we mean over here. So I'm working on this side before I, get my head around it before I start talking to you guys. So this unit here is sort of loosely assembled. These bolts are not tight. Okay, now I can actually rotate that to align everything quite happily, so that works, yeah, pretty good. So on my vehicle, obviously every vehicle is going to be slightly different, but you get the idea. This is the bottom side. It's going to sit down on top of that hanger plate there. I'm going to drill 2 holes in here and here. In my case, it's not going to be very precise as to where they have to go, so I'm just going to put them on the center line and probably come in about 10 millimeters in from the edge, so we've got good metal structure. Keeping in mind this side is under compression, you know, with the airbag, so it's really not going to do a whole heap of work. We sit that up there and up the top here. Now you can see that this bracket sits a little higher than the chassis. Because of the way my vehicle's behaving, I've actually just spent the time and removed the 3rd leaf out of my spring pack. The reason is I was finding the vehicle was too harsh with this suspension, and so I wanted to remove a leaf spring so that I can use these to control the difference, if that makes sense. Now that it's sitting back down on load with that leaf removed, I suspect that's the reason this chassis rail is now a bit lower. That's not going to be a problem for me. I'm going to bring this bracket down and position it, basically these bolt holes to bolt through the chassis as high as possible, or as high as reasonable will be how I do them. Because what I don't want to have happen is under a full compression that we start, you know, causing dramas with the airbag because it becomes a bump stop. That would obviously be a bad thing. All right, so that's where we're up to. We're going to start drilling holes and bolting those in. Then we'll be up to plumbing the airlines. Quick tip on tightening these bolts. They only need to be spanner tight, so not over torqued or, you know, given a heap, and don't use your rattle gun on them. Now the next thing is use a cross pattern to tighten them. So tighten this one, then that one, then this one, then this one, then that one, and work your way around so you pull this down nice and even, and just do that over a number of steps so this sits nice and square and you get that air seal you're looking for. So there it is, all mounted up now. So these have been drilled and tightened up. That's the side view there. So you can see how it works now. Obviously this is just on my vehicle. Your vehicle may well be different if it's a different vehicle. So this being an F250. And there's the top bracket, drilled, bolted. It's got the big washers on the back side there that come in the kit. All of these have been tightened down as per the instructions, and the air fitting's been fitted with sealant. So we're ready to plumb that one in, and away she goes. Looks good, eh? So all of these components are control components, you know, solenoids, the pressure senders, the manifold. So what I wanted to do is kind of mount these up so they're kind of easy to service, access and stuff. So I've got myself this piece of aluminium here. So I'm going to mount all of these components onto that panel there, and then what I'll be able to do is mount that into the box. I'll show you what I mean. So this is the box that mounts up under the tray. So the compressor's mounted in there. What I'm thinking is that on this back section down here, I'll mount that piece of aluminium, and I'll have it so that you can unscrew it from this box and then remove it when you want to you know, service the components or whatever. So that's my thinking at the moment. What I've done is I've put a hole in the front of the box there for the cabling and everything to run through, and that'll get power in here for the compressor. It should make it all fairly nice and neat and serviceable, and anyway, that's what we're going to do next. So let's have a look at the finished product. So I didn't show you all the fiddly stuff of sorting everything out. The solenoids there, that's the left hand side. Up, down for the right hand side there. Then there's my pressure solenoids there and there. There's my manifold. There's the compressor up the top there, and all of that. And that gives me this bottom area of the box to store some stuff. So it's going to have the air line for pumping up and down the tyres, and probably a couple of soft shackles, tree trunk protector, soft things like that that don't, you know, aren't going to hurt the electrics. There's one of my air chucks. I've got to find a better mounting system for that. I don't quite like it being cable tied like that, but I've got no other option just at the minute. So ideally I'll find a bracket or make a bracket that can mount that screwed off to the box. Same on the other side. Have a look at the bags. So that's in there installed, and yeah, pretty happy with the way that all came together. Probably a few little things I'll just tidy up, but when I get a chance, you know, things like where the airline's running through this hole here, I'll tidy that up so it doesn't rub and chafe in time. So I'll do a little bit more, but I'm just running out of time on it. The difference in ride height between the bag being empty, 0 psi, and then the bag being pumped up to 100 psi is 40 millimeters in lift. Now, I didn't obviously put these in to get lift, but I'm hoping that if I sit around about the 40-50 psi in the bags, that'll give me just a nice ride height, but give me that control I want. So that's the plan. Time will tell. I'll give you an update in due course. Let's have a look at how the system works. So on my control panel here, we've got 0 psi on the gauges. The top one is my left-hand side. So if I want the left side to go up, I can push the button and the compressor starts up and we put air into that airbag. As simple as that. Let air down, push the button. Now, so that you get the same amount of pressure in each side of the vehicle, you push the two buttons together. Now the system will equalize between left and right, and see how the numbers are starting to come up together. So we'll come up to about 40-50 psi. There we go. And so basically those airbags are now equalized. But obviously if you find that you've got a little bit more load on the driver's side to the passenger side, well, you can simply adjust that by the appropriate button. Simple as that. And now we can make sure that our ride is even. Over time you'll obviously understand what's needed for your vehicle and your application. Now, having this set up whilst you're on the road is a great feature because it gives you the ability to adjust the suspension on the fly. And I think that's going to be really handy, and over time I'll get to know what pressures work best on what roads and what loads. A really important factor to consider when you're looking at airbag suspensions is making sure you get a suspension system that is designed for your vehicle and suits the way you're going to operate your vehicle. Because the airbag is now going to put load into your chassis in an area that it wasn't primarily designed for, you have to have a system that's been designed with that consideration in mind. And the team at AAA Suspension are the guys that understand that stuff. Steve and his team, they've got their head around this. And so that's one of the reasons I'm happy to support them and help them get their kits out there and get them into your guys' hands, because I'm confident that they're going to be able to make sure you get a system that works well for your application. So if you're in a situation where you're using your vehicle light load and then heavy load, so you've got that load variation, an airbag solution can be a solution that really works for you and gives you that variable control that you need. So I trust that helps you understand how the AAA airbag suspension system can be installed and how you could fit that up to your vehicle. I'm Mad Matt. Stay safe in the trails.